Hello and welcome to the She is Courageous podcast, your weekly reminder that courage comes before confidence and mindset is where it starts. I'm Shelley Bosworth, business mindset coach, helping women to stop holding themselves back and start showing up boldly in business, work, and of course life. This podcast is your nudge to ditch the self-doubt, quieten the overthinking, and take action that builds real confidence. Because she is courageous and she is you. Hello and welcome back to the She is Courageous podcast. This week it's a guest week and I have got the fabulous Susan. I nearly said Susan Cooper because she runs Cooper Accountancy. And actually she's giggling already because we've had this conversation so many times. In the time that I have known Susan, I've had to address or deal with so many different surnames, and that makes her sound really dodgy, and I promise she's not. But so Susan Perry is here. Susan Perry is the founder of Cooper Accounting. She is an accountant, as the title might give away a little bit. She's an incredible member of the She is Courageous Collective. I'm very proud to call her a client as well, and even more proud to say she's a friend. And so, Susan, welcome to the She is Courageous podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. So I always start every guest episode with me saying, tell us about you. So I'd love you to tell our listeners a little bit of your story. I've obviously just said that you run Cooper Accounting, you are an accountant, but let's go back a little bit. Tell our listeners how you ended up where you are now. So take us back a little bit. Tell us about Susan, her journey, and how she got to Cooper Accounting.
I'll tell you about Susan with the first surname. When I was with my maiden name. So I was always one of those kids that was, I want to go earn money. I was never one of those kids that was like, no, I'm going to go to university, do my A-levels, do a degree. It's like the moment I could leave school, I left school and I went and earned money, which is when you could. At the grand old age of 16, not allowed to anymore.
No.
So it naturally progressed that the way to do that was to go and work for my mum. She was an accountant and she had her own practice within a practice. And over the years, slowly worked my way up and I became a senior accountant, I think. And then along those times, I was no, I'm not going to be an accountant. I'm going to go be a barmaid. And quickly realised that wasn't going to make me a fortune. So carried on being an accountant. And then I had the fabulous idea of being more industry specific rather than practice specific, because there's two different sectors you can go into being an accountant. So I took the leap of being the practice manager for the firm my mum was a part of and that I'd worked for. And that involved looking after the practice as a whole, looking after the practice accounts and staff. And then in 2010 I was made redundant, which was lovely. And people do sometimes say, well, how did your mum make you redundant? She didn't know.
Wow.
So she was told at the same time I was sat down and told.
Gosh.
Which was interesting, bless her. So in 2010 I decided, what am I going to do now? It was coming up to the first wedding. And it was just like, I need to do something. So I decided to set up my own bookkeeping company. And I never come away from the firm I was part of. It's an amicable split. So I was able to do some work for a couple of their clients, including some of my mum's. So it's sort of set that ball rolling. And as time went on, I started to do more and more bookkeeping for my mum. And in 2012, she came away from the firm that she was part of to set up on her own. And that's when I started to do more and more with her again. And then in 2019, I bought into her practice, became a director and shareholder. Towards the end of 2019, mum was very much sort of, nope, I want to retire. I have got no interest in this whatsoever. So we started discussions with a firm locally to us, and she sold her part and I went in as a director in February 2020, just before the fun of 2020 came along.
Yeah.
It's always pre-COVID, post-COVID. And then in February 24, the firm wanted to go in a different direction that I wasn't particularly keen on and didn't align with what I wanted to do. So on your lovely Dubai retreat, it was a case of, do I stay or do I go now, as the song goes. So May 24 was the day I went solo. And then that was 6 months before marrying the new husband. So start a business, get married.
I remember obviously in 2024 when you're like, you know what, I'm thinking about, is this the moment? Is this a sign for it's time for me to do this on my own?
Mm-hmm.
But actually part of the conversation then was, I'm getting married this year. I think you were moving house as well. There was a lot going on. Is now the right time to start a business? There's probably a great segue into, you know, there's never a right time, is there?
Definitely.
About quite a lot. Wow. Okay. Before we come racing into current world, because you are now a solopreneur, I hate that word. You know, you run your own business very successfully, I might add. We're kind of almost 18 months down since, so 18 months since that decision you made. And I know it's been a whirlwind 18 months. But if we just go back a couple of steps. So essentially always been in the accounting world, and of course mum in the accounting world too. And I'm not going to put you on the spot and ask you questions around like accounting. I am intrigued though, if I could, and you can say no, but I think one of the questions that I'd love to ask is around working with family, because we talk about this quite a lot, and you know, we see this more and more in today's world, I think, as well, particularly where people are setting up their own businesses. You know, you see a lot of wives and husbands in their businesses together. But you worked obviously with your mum, and there are two parts there. Obviously there's that piece you just mentioned about redundancy. That must have been a really challenging time for your mum, but actually for the two of you, maybe not. I'd love to know a bit about like the pros and cons, if you're allowed, of working with your mum. How have you found that over the years? Because I'm going to make some assumption there's a fairly good relationship there.
It's very difficult. We're very much the same.
Oh, interesting.
So we would clash, but there was a lot of the time is my mum isn't mum, she's Jill. And people are like, why are you calling your mum Jill? Well, she's Jill because that's her name. So
and it's not something you had to almost train yourself in through the workplace.
Not really, because I was only 16 when I started working. So when I was talking to clients, or when I started to talk to clients or colleagues, it was, oh, Jill said, not my mum said. So it's quite, I got into it quite quick. So, but now it's really hard to get out of it.
Yeah.
So even we haven't sort of worked together for 6 years plus, she's still Jill.
I'd not even thought about that. Like, I'm imagining this piece around, I can totally understand why. Obviously, you have to do that, right? And you have to do that quickly. But I can now see how, like, all these years later, actually, it's probably harder to retrain yourself back into mum than it is Jill. And what about from a boundaries perspective? I mean, again, I know you were obviously young when you first started working with her.
Yeah.
But has that ever been something, and I don't mean in a bad way, by the way, boundaries aren't always a bad thing. Let's remember that thing, everybody that's listening. Boundaries are just about, I think boundaries get a really bad rap because they're so often only talked about when we need to change something. But did you have to think about boundaries quite quickly, or have you had to?
It wasn't something I would have necessarily thought about consciously. There, across the whole time that we was working together, there were difficulties, and I think it was more difficult the older I got as well, because obviously you form your own opinions. I think other people were trying to put boundaries in that we worked with, because there was one of the directors at the first firm I was part of that my mum was in partnership with. He was very well aware of the mother-daughter relationship, but it was never like that when we was working together. I was working the hours I needed to work and things like that. And how the firm was set up was each director partner had their own company within a company. So no one else really got too involved until it started to grow and the dynamics of the company changed. But there was times when we would disagree, but it was never work related. We rarely had disagreements on a work related thing. It would always be personal. But I think part of having that thing of saying, well, that's Jill and mum's mum at home, didn't cross over that much. I mean, there was times sort of that I'd go walking in her office like sheepishly, Mum, can I borrow a tenner, please? So those were the times when it would overlap and whatever else. But generally, I got to where I got to through hard work. It was never just sort of handed to me on a platter, and she would have never have given it to me on a platter either. And when I left school, the plan was always I would qualify to become an accountant, buy in, take over, she would retire, and then I'd have the business. So when I went the bookkeeping route, it wasn't quite panning out that way, but it obviously did in the end. But on the thing of boundaries, it wasn't ever something that I really thought about. But then there was times sort of when we had the staff Christmas dues and summer dues, my mum would have a drink and it would really embarrass me, bless her. And that was when it was hard. It was just sort of like that. Oh, that's my mum.
That's my mum. Yeah, I mean, just I've never.
And everyone else found it hilarious. I didn't.
Well, and do you know what's interesting? So first of all, I mean, I've never worked with a member of my family. So I met my husband through work, but we weren't in a relationship then or anything like that. So it's really just interesting listening. And I can imagine, certainly as a younger girl, you know, working with your mum is one thing. I think in some ways it probably can strengthen a relationship. It can also test it at times too. I think what was really interesting there, and I mean, I am giggling about you kind of going, oh, mum, for God's sake, at the Christmas party. What's actually quite interesting is when you were talking there about actually other people. So I guess you were so young, like it started so early on. It's all what you've always known. So you've kind of found your way with it. Whereas actually, this is a great example of where other people can tend to make a bigger deal about things than we do because of their stuff. Yeah. So actually people are projecting all the time, aren't they? And I fully understand, like in a workplace, if you knew there was a mum and daughter relationship, you're going to have some awareness of it, and that might get you thinking certain things. But so much in life, actually, people just project their own stuff and then make a bigger deal of things than it's necessary. You know, you're describing there, we were absolutely fine with it, but this particular director, okay, you know, it's a great, I just think it's a great example of reminding us that very often what's going on for someone else is about them, not actually about us at all, even if it's projected into us. Does that make sense what I just said? I think that's a great example. So I'm sure there are some very funny stories and some challenging moments along the way. But I wonder if actually, like you just said, you didn't necessarily think about the boundaries along the way, but I wonder if actually it's helped and strengthened boundaries along the way without realizing. Because back to the point around, so often boundaries only come up when we've got a challenge we haven't faced into. And actually you learn at a young age to have to kind of work on a boundary pieces that many would probably still say, hand up, Shelley, in their 40s, 50s, you know, boundaries with family is something they're still working on. So, you know, it's just an interesting kind of piece.
Mum probably had the boundaries in place more than I did.
Right.
And she would probably have been very sort of work's work, home's home. We don't mix it. So I think as adults, you are very much more aware of boundaries and needing to put them in place. And it probably would have been harder on me as well without realising it, because she'd have probably been a lot harder on me than she would have been a normal staff member, just to prove a point. And I probably would be exactly the same if one of my kids come and work for me. It's just sort of, you've got to make an example rather than just going, oh, they can just get away with anything.
And I think that's really true. I think you probably did have it harder because from your mum's perspective, and we can't, obviously she's not here, so we're kind of surmising, both of us are, quite frankly, but you just said it yourself, and I don't have children, but if I did and they worked for me, or if I had a member of my family in a business where there was lots of others, it's almost like you want to show everyone we can do this, we can make it work. So you know, because again, everybody's got a view on everything, right? And it isn't necessarily the norm. And so I guess that's the bit about showing that just because it's not the norm doesn't mean it can work. And you showed it. So, you know, well done to you and your mum. Have you ever wondered what you would have done if you hadn't gone into the business with mum?
I haven't really, because it was never an option. I wouldn't say it's not an option, because if I didn't want to do that, there was other things I wanted to do. But the problem is I wanted to be an architect or a vet, which both involved being like 8 years in university and higher education, and I had
which didn't fit with your I want to earn money now, quite frankly, did it?
Didn't want the debt, didn't want to be just yeah, it just didn't interest me at all. I'm not particularly academic. I'm more of a hands-on type. I'm a hands-on type of academic, not a reading academic.
Yeah.
So it would have been hard to do that. And it's just like, yeah, no, I've got no interest in that. And having an older brother as well, at 16, he left school and went to work, ironically, for my dad.
Oh.
I very much look at past experiences or things, evidence around me, and it works. It worked for them, and so it worked for us as well.
And it absolutely worked for you. And just if I could ask, and maybe you do or don't know the answer, but you said really early on, you know, I left school, I wanted to earn. And then you said, you know, 8 years waiting for that was not an option, quite frankly. Yeah. What do you think was the driver for that wanting to work? Because I know you and I are in the same kind of generation. I remember that very. I want to get out there and I want to earn, and I know what my reasons were. What do you think the drivers or the reasons for you were that you just wanted to get out there and start earning?
I don't know, really. I mean, we've touched on this when we've worked one-to-one, is that I struggled to look back on childhood years to see what those light bulb moments of, oh, that's why I do that. And they just never really come. I think because my dad was self-employed for a lot of his working life, as was my mum with her practice. Obviously, I saw what that gave by doing that. So I don't know what the driver was. I think that's just what my mum and dad,
you learn, right?
You're old enough to work. So you go to work.
And I think that in itself is more than a good enough answer. I just think it's always really interesting because I'm listening to you, and like you just said, you know, mum ran her business, dad ran his business, my brother went into his business, I went into mum's. And I think I've said this before, like I came from a world where I didn't know anyone that ran their own businesses. And it's another one of those really interesting pieces. And it doesn't mean it's right or wrong. And it's not a bad or good thing. Like that's what you knew. And so you absolutely naturally followed that path and it's really worked for you. And interestingly, I didn't know that at all. And here I am now, all these years later, wishing I had, because I followed this path because I was told, like, that's what you do. You go and get someone else to pay you and you get someone else to make it really secure. I just think it's really interesting that we all live these different experiences and they play out in different ways. And it's no right or wrong to any of it. I remember the desire to earn was basically all the things I wanted to do. I just wanted all the money to go and do all the things. It was really aspiration you wanted to do. Okay, so let's fast forward. Here we are in 2025. And as you said, so 2024, things were shifting and changing in the business that you were working in. You knew that things were going in a different direction. You weren't sure if that was the direction that you wanted to go in. You were starting to ask yourself, what if I did this on my own? What would that look like? And of course, you've been exposed to running your own business or running a business all your life. And you did make a very, very courageous decision, because whatever anyone says, making that decision is huge. Carrying it through is the second part of huge, but making the decision, particularly when you're in, like, might not have been going in the direction you wanted to, but you're in a comfortable position, you were earning well, you know, you knew the parameters, you were in control of everything. You decided to set up on your own. Can you recall the thoughts and feelings at the time? So, you know, was it as simple as, that's it, I'm going to do it? Because you can tend to be, if it's okay to say, you know, you're very good in terms of quite black and white. Yeah, you just said it around, you're a doer. Was there any moment of wobble? And if so, how did you work through that? Tell us about kind of when you started to kind of really decide, if that makes sense as a question.
There's a couple of times throughout the 4 years that I was in a director of this firm, there's a couple of times things popped up and was like, oh, don't really agree with that. And it was well, if I want to go, I can go, but it's going to be, everything's intertwined. It's just a ball. Oh, it's going to be horrific.
Yeah.
It's going to be harder than I think it's going to be. And it was a couple of times that happened. It wasn't like every couple of days. It was once in a blue moon that I'd had those thoughts. And then just before the retreat, there was a time where it was just like, actually, not enough's enough. I either put up and shut up or I go. There was only really two options there, and I didn't, and it was hard to come to that decision as well, because a lot rode on it. And like you said, I was comfortable. The money was coming in. It didn't matter too much if I lost a client. It didn't matter too much if I gained a client. Nothing really mattered that much. Every month I was getting paid. And then it was a case of, if I go on my own, I know I can do it because my mum did it previously, and I knew it could work. So there was a lot of times where I was like, oh, I don't know if I've made the right decision. And there was a lot of things I worked with our friend Steph on. I struggled to make it for probably best part of 10 years. I've struggled to make decisions because I second guess them. Right. So whilst I'm very much sort of black and white, sod it, I'll do it, there is sometimes if I sit too long in my own head of, am I making the right decision? Is it all going to go horribly wrong? What if this happens? What if that happens? Blah, blah, blah. And then I have to if I've made that decision, I need to snap myself out of it and just roll with the punches and see what happens. And I think we're quite similar with that sometimes, is that we could just, let's just go for it, see what happens. So there were a few times, because there was an opportunity for me to get quite a nice lump sum of money in the bank. But I knew full well that would only last so long. I'm a spender. So it wouldn't have lasted that long. As much as I'm not like a normal account of the squirrels money away. I'm just like, so we'll just book a holiday. Let's go Florida. Let's just book them all once in a lifetime holiday, and then worry like 2 years down the line when there's no more money left.
So I think, first of all, there's a number of people can relate to everything you've just said. So, I mean, first of all, I love that. Can I just have a moment? The accountant has just admitted that she's a spender. Not all accountants are squirreling money away. And actually, I think that's just myth out there. Not all accountants are like, you cannot spend. And, you know, this is not at all. Okay. And life is for living, right? But actually, I think what's really important there, to anybody that's listening that maybe is in an employed role and has been thinking for a while about should they, shouldn't they want to, but they just don't know what it looks like. You know, we can talk ourselves out of doing the things we want to really, really quickly. I'll never say to someone, you should leave or you shouldn't leave. That's not what this is ever about. This example is about being in a scenario where things were moving in a direction that didn't really fit for you, but there was a voice in your head saying, you know, God, it ultimately, it would be easier to stay. It might not be perfect. It might not even keep me happy, but it would be easier because there's a lot it could cause if I don't. And what I loved was, in true Susan speak, you said, I had two choices: put up and shut up, or basically do something about it. And I think that's really important for everyone to hear right now, because we have choices. We always have choices. Yours in that moment was put up and shut up, i.e. stay in the easy bit, get the salary, do the job, might not like everything that's going on, but there are benefits to it. Or if I really do want something to change, I've got to do the hard stuff to make it happen. And I think that is a message to everybody about anything you are thinking. If there is anything that you've been working on or thinking about and you haven't done anything about it, you have a choice. Put up and stop talking about it and either just accept it's not going to happen, you're not going to move forward. Sorry to be quite so blunt to everyone that's listening right now, or do something about it. And in this moment, you said, you know what, I'm going to do something about it. I'm actually going to do the hard stuff. And it feels scary. And there's a load of stuff that comes with it, but I'm going to give it a go. And then you really honestly said, but I also had to work on myself there, because anybody, if we start thinking about something too much, our brain straight away goes into safety, comfort. Oh, are you sure? Are you sure? That's not just you, Susan. I just want to call that out to everybody. Like, the longer we think about something, the more reasons we will find not to do it, because actually doing something different means we're going to step into an unknown. And so I love that. But what I think is so important is actually what you did was something about that as well. So you said, you know what, I can say I'm going to do something and then talk myself out of it, or I can go and seek some support to help me work through, actually make the decision, work through the decision, go make this happen. And look at you now. So I hope it's okay to play that back. But I think for everyone listening, it's not about leaving a job at this moment in time or leaving a business. It's about realizing you wanted something else, but acknowledging, okay, that's going to take some tough stuff. And I therefore make a decision, put up and shut up, or do something about it and face into the tough. And what you then did was face into the tough stuff, which is, well, you know, this is the She is Courageous podcast, everybody. That in itself is courage.
Yeah. Because there's never a right time to leave either. So where you was touching on that, people are in employed jobs and it's sort of, do I stay, do I go? There's never a right time when you're going to go, right, I've got enough money there, I can do it. It's never going to plan out that way. And God knows I never intended on saying, right, you know what I'm going to do? Come March, when the house sale goes through and we bought the house, is then set up a business at the same time. And whilst trying to organise a wedding.
Yes, to get married 6 months later. Exactly.
I would have never done it.
You're so right. There is never a right time. In fact, but there's always a reason we can tell ourselves it's not the right time. I truly think that. I think we can all, in anything, however big or small it might feel, we can all find a reason to say, oh, it's probably not the right time right now. And actually, it takes far more courage to go, it probably isn't the right time, but when will be? And admit that.
Yeah.
Wow. So here you are. How has it been 18 months down the line? 21 that's out there going, God, she's exactly like where she was 18 months ago. It's kind of where I am now. What would you say to someone listening if they've been thinking about it and wobbling for a while?
It's never going to be easy. It's never going to be plain sailing. There's going to be hiccups. There's going to be things that crop up where you will sit and go, why have I done this? But ultimately, my main thing was I am in charge of my own destiny. I can't sit there and complain that I haven't had a bonus because someone's not giving it to me, because I can't give myself a bonus if I don't go earn the money.
Yeah.
So it just becomes, you're so much more in that bubble of you can choose, you can make the choices that you want to make. You're not asking somebody else for permission. You're not justifying to anybody else. It's you're alone. And that was something that was a big push for me to go solo, was I want to be able to make those decisions. I wasn't able to make them as part of a larger firm. My voice was quite small in that arena. So by going solo, I was able to make those decisions. And that in itself is hard. Yeah. So I never used to have to worry about software. I never used to have to worry about clients coming in. There was so much I never used to have to worry about or deal with. And then all of a sudden it's like, I've got no one to pick the phone up to. So that side of it is quite daunting and scary. But then I'd built up, the years before I left, I'd built up a network of people. So at the retreat in Dubai, when I did make the decision to go solo, I was able to say, yeah, I can go solo because I've got someone that can help me build a website. I've got someone that can help me be a virtual assistant. I've got someone that can do X, Y, Z. So having that support system around me as well made it a lot easier, because you didn't have to worry, oh, who the hell am I going to get to do that?
And I think this is so important, because I met you before, well, obviously, because you came to my retreat and you were on the precipice of making a decision. But when I met you, you were a director in the business, and I met you through networking. And you and I are big fans of network, and we know how important the network is, community, support. But to your point there, I think so many business owners do this, or like when they first step into running their own business, what they haven't thought. We think we've thought of it all. I always say to everybody, learn from our mistakes, learn from our learnings. You did, and I did the same. Actually, I started networking before I left corporate. Because I said earlier, I didn't know anyone that ran their own business. I didn't think, and I wasn't thinking cleverly like you, like I'm going to need help with this, this, and this. I was thinking, I don't know anyone that runs their own business. I'll tell you what, I actually thought all of my corporate friends will be too busy to talk to me and I'll have no friends. That was my driver to go networking. But to your point, what you also had around you already was the connections and the support with what you didn't know how to do, what you knew you would need, but didn't know where to start. And I think that's why so many early business owners, like in their first stages, it just becomes so overwhelming, because we do have to do it all. We don't know what we don't know. We don't know how to do it. We've given ourselves a really hard time about what we're crap at. And we're thinking we can't actually make any money without having all those things in the background. And the power of networking people. And I know networking scares people, but just go find people. Go find your people ASAP.
I mean, networking is great. It brings in income, but then it's also looking at it as building up that network of people. And that was how I always viewed it, is I might get a client or two out of it. However, I wanted to build up that network of people to help me and my clients.
100%. And I think one of the things, look, you say this a lot, return on investment isn't always monetary.
Mm.
I think we hear that ROI word, and don't get me wrong, business owners need to make money. But let's be really clear, you don't make money immediately. The overnight success you think that everyone's got, not true. And actually investing in your network, your support network, the return you get on that isn't always monetary. It's not always clients, but it absolutely is support and community and knowing who to ask for the things you need to ask for. So, accountant, I've got quite a few clients that are accountants, and I love the fact that all of my accountant clients bust the myth that accountants are boring, nerdy, geeky. None of you are, right? I know one of your driving forces in the work you do is to remove the barriers and the worry of how complicated accounting can be. I think a lot of business owners are scared of accounting and accountants. So just tell us about kind of your approach to accounting, what you're really passionate about, not just in the doing of the accounts, because that's the work, right? But what you're really passionate about in terms of you and your service that you deliver.
So with me, I'm trying to be a lot more with clients, is to give them that personal approach rather than just, come on board, I'll speak to you once a year, blah, blah, blah. There are clients like that, and I love those clients because it means you can just churn the tax returns and you get paid. But then there are clients that want a little bit more. There is becoming a shift because of automation and things like that, of accounting is becoming a bit more business advisory as well as doing the accounts and calculating the taxes. But part of the reason I never really wanted to be part of a big large firm, it's great if you've got multi-million-pound turnover and whatever else, but I wanted the clients to feel comfortable with me. So if they're asking me a question, I'm not going to be sitting there going, so in section blah 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 of the this legislation, then you will find the answer. It's just, no, you can or you can't, and this is the reason why you can't, or this is the reason why you can. So, and there's a huge shift, I think, recently, where people aren't seeking advice from accountants and professionals with the big things such as taxes, wills, legal matters, because we have so much information at our fingertips. 20 years ago, the internet was just becoming the internet. It wasn't what we have now. So a quick Google search will give you an answer of some description. However, the answer isn't always as it appears. So how I try to work with clients is, and ChatGPT, we'll talk about that in a minute, is the way I want to work with clients is that you haven't got to be on an all singing, all dancing software. If you keep on top of everything and keep on top of your business, finances and things like that by writing down in a good old-fashioned book, I've got one somewhere, then do it. I love it when
the old red ledger. Look at you.
Love it.
Oh my gosh. If you are listening rather than watching on YouTube, so Susan's face just now is, I love the old red ledger.
I love them.
I remember those days back in, like you say, 20 years ago. Yeah, I remember back in the first retail job I had, that's what we were doing. That's how old I am too.
It's how clients will keep on top of everything, and they don't want to do the software, then do it, because especially next year when Making Tax Digital comes in and all that fun stuff, if writing it down on a piece of paper is going to make you do it more often, then do it. I'll worry about the digital side of things. Obviously being on software is a lot easier than that, and it has more information at your fingertips, but people learn differently. I'm not one that can sit there, read a book and know how to do something. I've got to do it several times before it actually sinks into the brain. So it's the same with anything like bookkeeping, accountancy, taxes. If you're doing it often, then it's going to stick in the mind better, but you've got to do it in a way that you understand. So it's working with clients on the fact of, I'm not going to have you rock up for a meeting and say, right, you have to do this, you have to do that. It's like, well, what do you do at the moment? What are you going to do on a frequent basis? that's how we'll work then.
It's really interesting. I almost hear you saying, I use a phrase quite a lot, that my role as a coach is to meet people where they are at. I use that phrase a lot. And actually, when you were just talking there, I think it's the same. What you're saying is, you know, I'm not going to, if anyone comes to work with me, I don't say, right, these are the systems I use. You need to comply with my systems. And I have met accountants like that. And that's fine. That works for some, right? But actually you're saying, you know what, if someone comes to me and says, look, I keep everything really manually, you're like, okay, that's fine. I can work with that. This is what we'll do. You will find a way to work that's right for the individual.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean you're constantly chopping and changing your way of working either. I know that about you. What you're saying is that actually, I'm not going to say you have to come in where you have to work within these confines of my way of working. You want to make it easier for people, right? You did mention the dreaded AI in there. Let's chat GPT, AI. Well, I think it's an important one because, you know, we're living in a world right now. I think there's two things I'd love your thoughts on. And I think they're amalgamated. So tell me if they're not. But we are living in a world, and for clarity to anyone listening, Susan is a UK accountant. We obviously know I'm based in Dubai, but you are a UK accountant. So we live in a world where finances are challenging. There's no denying it. Like, there's a lot of caveats to that statement, but finances are challenging. And I think in business owner terms, more and more people are looking at and thinking all the time about where they spend their money, the resources they should invest in their business. And I will always advocate for an accountant. It was the first thing I invested in, and it will be the last thing that ever goes for me, right? That's me personally. But we also live in a world of technology. Google will tell you what it thinks you should do. ChatGPT stroke AI will tell you. And people, I think, therefore believe they don't need certain services and resources because they can find out what they need to. If I were to say to you, in this world of AI, technology wanting to give you all the answers and challenging economics, if you were to say to someone like, this is why you should have an accountant, or maybe that's not the right word, what would you say? What are your thoughts on all of this is basically what I'm asking.
So don't get me wrong, I use ChatGPT. I had a query the other day, and it was a complicated tax matter, and I got some advice from a tax advisor, expert tax advisor, because it was that more in depth. And the answer that they gave me, I put into ChatGPT to simplify it so I can understand it.
Got it. It's a great tool. Let's be really clear. Okay.
It is the tool that everybody needs to use, but use correctly.
Yes.
What you don't want to be doing is putting into ChatGPT is, I'm self-employed, what can I claim, blah, blah, blah. It will give you a broad answer and what you generally can. Actually, I need to do that, see what it does come up with.
Well, that's really interesting. I challenge you. And I'm just going to say it's so interesting because we have to remember, right, ChatGPT, let's be really clear about this, okay? And again, other AI tools are available on the market, but it's a great tool, okay? And I don't know anyone that's not using it a lot. But I have a friend who's an AI specialist, and the phrase she uses is, you have to remember that ChatGPT hallucinates because it is drawing its information from everything that's on the web.
Yeah.
You know, and so it only takes a few rogue pieces out there to cause some issue anyway. So yeah. Disclaimer to everybody. Let's remember it's a great tool, but as my friend Appa says, it hallucinates.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It does. And it's just sort of, it will give you an answer. But it's like with anything, when you ask someone for their advice, you will glean the information that you want from that advice. Yeah. So if you're talking to your friend, I want to leave my husband, he's this, he's that, blah, 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 what should I do? And then leave him. Oh yeah, but I don't know if I want to. You're going to skirt around what and figure out what you actually want to hear and read and see in the grand ethos that is the internet. And it's a fantastic tool. We've got all that information at our fingertips and it's brilliant. But it's interpreting that information.
Yeah.
So as an accountant, obviously we train, we study, we do exams, we get our qualifications. It's not a quick. So when you're looking at an accountant and you ask them how much they're going to cost and they come back with a figure, it's a case of, and it was what we were talking about earlier on return on investment, it's not always monetary. So by paying that accountant £500 a year, you're getting their expertise. You can pick up the phone and ask them, can I do this? Can I do that? They will go and find the answer and then tell you whether you can or not. You're then not sitting there Googling ChatGPT and looking on the socials, etc., to see if you can find an answer and then getting what the answer that you want to have. So if you're someone that's looking for an answer of yes, you can put that through, but you actually can't, you're going to find all the evidence to say you can, which isn't always 100% correct. I will say, when using AI tools like ChatGPTs, clarify where it's read that information on the HMRC website.
Yeah, I think that's a really good tip, because there is a reality, people are using it. We're not saying don't use it, we're saying use it sensibly. I think that's a really good tip. Thank you for that.
And it's one of those things of, I would never say to someone you have to have an accountant, because sometimes it is just not feasible. So you can only invest in things that you've got the money to sit there and do.
Absolutely.
So if you're only earning £2,000 a year and you're having to pay half of that to an accountant, I mean, I would love everyone to have an accountant and that expertise at their fingertips, but it's not always a reality for some people. And yes, it can be quite easy to go through the HMRC website, through the tax return that they put up, and put in the information. It's knowing what you can and what you can't claim for.
And I mean, look, as you say, it's a moving feast, right? I mean, the world's changing at speed, and it certainly over here. So I will speak accountancy generally. I was having this conversation with someone here in Dubai and saying, look, I don't have the time, the energy, or the expertise to keep on top of the changes. So that's why I have an accountant. And I think the same in the UK. I think things are constantly being updated and changed. And because of digital, I know things are shifting and changing quite rapidly over there. If I were to, and this is not an easy question to answer, and I'm very aware of that, but you're absolutely right. Like, not everyone is in a position to invest in an accountant, particularly in the early stages. What do you think are the things to start looking for? What's the turning point? What's the moment when you should be going, do you know what, I probably need to be thinking about an accountant then? Do you think it's a turnover piece? When do you think, or what do you think are the red flags maybe, or the signs that it's time to invest in an accountant?
I mean, if you're worried about anything, if you're worried about, am I doing that right? Is the tax man going to come and knock in? If you are looking to ChatGPT, the socials, your mates that don't run businesses, to ask questions and get the information about whether something's allowable or not, then that's probably the time to speak to an accountant. I don't think it's necessarily a turnover piece or anything like that. It's just at the point where it's an individual choice. Ultimately, you're either going to say, yes, I can see that return, or I can't. It's the same as if someone wants to go build their own website or get someone to do it for them. There are tools out there that will help you do it, and therefore you're not paying someone to do it for you, but then you're spending however many hours,
who knows how much time, and that's what it always
that website when you could be doing client work and getting some money in. And that's the same with the accounts. You could be sitting, and the tax return is, you could be sitting there for one day every month trying to figure out what you've got to do with your tax return, then you're leaving it to the last minute because you're not sure on something, you're not sure where to put something, and then all of a sudden it's this mad dash. You get this tax bill at the end of January, you're like, Christ, how am I going to pay for that? And it could have been done 6 months ago if you'd have just said, here's my stuff, and the accountant does it for you.
And I think you're right. I think it's like anything. You have to start to notice, where are you spending your time? And are you spending your time in places that are actually beneficial to your business? And you might decide that you spending time on your accounts is beneficial to your business. But if you're spending more time there than you are in what's at your core business is about, that might be the time to ask a question. What's the biggest myth you would like to bust from an accountant's perspective?
I think there will always be some clients that will, but I don't want to pay any tax. That's great, no one does. But in reality, paying tax is a good thing. I think some people find paying tax is a bad thing. And when you're going into business, you really need to get out of your head that it's a bad thing. If you're paying tax, it means you're making money. If you become VAT registered, you've hit that first bar of going over, of getting over that VAT threshold. It's not a bad thing paying tax. It means you're making money and you're doing well, and it's an indicator that you are. Obviously there are smart choices that you can make to keep the tax down,
I think you're right. There can be so much almost resentment towards tax being paid. And ultimately, particularly those of you that want to grow businesses, you just got to reframe that. You've got to shift your mindset in that, when you hit those brackets, it means you're succeeding.
Mhm.
And this is not a political podcast where we get into what your tax is or isn't being spent on. That's a whole other conversation. But I think we have to, it's like anything, isn't it? We can spend a lot of time really pushing against things that we don't like, or we can go, do you know what? I accept it for what it is because I can't change it. What I can do is influence or change me and how I respond to it. And there's a brilliant example. We talk about this all the time in mindset. Someone said recently, or I listened to something, we've been talking about it a lot in the collective, create a bigger gap between the response and the reaction, or the reaction and the response, actually ran that way. And that's a good example. You just got to go, do you know what? I can't change the rules of the UK tax system, but what I can do is change my response and reaction to it.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. And then use an accountant to help you make smarter decisions, which was really important.
That's the thing. It's just, there are tax savings out there. Obviously, they're not as fun as they used to be when I first started. A lot of those loopholes have been
But I
closed,
think
annoyingly.
and I think that's another point though. Like, the rules are changing fairly constantly. And I think the old days of, just put as much through the business as you can, live life through the business. That's not the way things are done anymore. And I think that's the bit around, many people will advise you, lots of, and forgive me, I'm going to make some bold statements, but, lots of people that have been in business for a long time will say, oh, well, we just, just got to put as much through the business as you can. That's not necessarily the case anymore. I guess the point here is, I'm not going to sit and give financial advice, but actually, if you are asking yourself, I think that's a really important way you worded it. If you're asking yourself lots of questions about what you can or can't do, it's time to talk to an accountant. Don't try. It's an important subject. And actually, you're working damn hard to earn your money. So go and speak to the experts to get the right advice in terms of how to take it. And I think what I would say to everyone is, if you want hints and tips on accounting made simple and real for you, in the show notes, we'll have all of Susan's details. Give her a shout. She will absolutely help you. So there's the myth you want to bust.
There is another one. Sorry to interrupt.
No, please do.
That many years ago, we used to have phone calls from clients. So my mate said, and it would always be a conversation of down the pub. My mate down the pub told me I can do X, Y, Z. Or the most common ones is, I'm doing an extension on my house. My mate said I can put it through the business. It's like, well, no, not really. The house isn't your business. But I've recently, and I've harped on at you about this, right? And it's just, I've recently noticed this on my algorithm, because obviously I'm an accountant, on the likes of Instagram, TikTok, and the socials. There is people putting information out there, and that information isn't always incorrect, but it's misleading. And when I was at one of your retreats, one of the ladies there said that obviously to capture someone's attention, you've got like 1.7 seconds to capture their attention on a reel or post in Instagram. So obviously the title or the first thing you see on a post makes you go, oh, I can do that. And the danger I'm sort of seeing is that people don't always then watch that or look through that specific information, or look at the gump underneath it to see if it is correct, or the explanation of that. So I can see there's quite a big shift of, and this is where I was saying that we've got so much information at our fingertips, and people are looking at the socials, and there are people putting information out there of, you can do this through your business, you can do this through your business, you can do this through your company. And whilst it's not completely incorrect, it can be misleading. And there has been quite a few things of, I can put my holiday through the business. It's like, well, no, you can't. You can, if it is a business trip and you're there personally as well, you can put a percentage of it through, or an element of it through. But all that Joe Public's going to say is that first thing of, I can put my thing through the business, and they're not. And that's where I was saying, people don't then go get the advice from the professionals to say, that bit's sort of missing now, whereas we used to get them. My mate down the pub told me I could do this.
Well, and I guess social media has become my mate down the pub. ChatGPT has become my mate down the pub. I think you're so right. Like when you were talking about, that 1.7 seconds, which I remember the lady saying, and it's essentially the equivalent of what used to be the red top headline, right?
Yeah.
That, well, I saw in the Sun last week that this happened. Actually, that's not what happened at all. That's what you took from the headline and didn't read the article.
Yeah.
And it's, let's be honest, it's almost dangerous, and I don't say that lightly. We see it on all things, but if we're not really reading these things or not truly validating, big mistakes can be made. And actually, we also live in a world now where the consequence for getting things wrong can be quite significant too. And I love that you want to, I know we've had a bit of banter back and forth about the whole My Mate Down the Pub. Keep your eyes peeled, people that are listening. I think you're going to see a lot more My Mate Down the Pub, because we think it's a really great tagline. But I think it's a really great way to position for people. What that person's suggesting isn't necessarily the whole truth. They're not trying to mislead you, but they're not giving you the
entire... It's a great conversation piece.
Yeah. So
I still get clients phone me up and say, "Oh, my friend's able to do this and this. Can I do it?" So, no, because this you can do some of it, but not all of it. It's a conversation piece to have, or starter to have, with your accountants. I saw this on Instagram, and don't be afraid to say I saw this on Instagram.
No, absolutely,
because then we know where you're getting the information from. But it's like I said, it's a great place to start that conversation and to get the opinion of somebody, your accountant, your tax advisor, whoever it is, of whether that would work for you, because everyone's circumstances are different and individual.
Yeah.
And what works for one person's business isn't going to work for another.
A perfect example of, we never know what's going on behind the picture. We don't know what's going on behind the post. We do not know everyone's situations, and it's so important to, it plays out everywhere, but actually in these scenarios, just validate the information, get the expert advice. But it actually is a good reminder again of,
if you haven't got the funds to have an accountant, is put it into AI, but specify, make sure, or show me that HMRC agree with this, and ask for the links back, and only trust anything that comes from a HMRC link.
Brilliant.
Or HMRC website, because that is the rule, that's the legislation, that's the rules, that's the law.
This is one of those subjects, and there's so much we could talk about when it comes to accounting, but actually the piece here is, I think to people listening, if you don't have an accountant, and we're not trying to scaremonger people, right? Actually, what we always want to do is help people understand the truth, and really kind of, I guess, question yourself about the pressure you're putting on yourself, where you're spending your time. And for you, you're so passionate about ensuring people are getting the right information, right? That's what this is all about for you. You just want to make sure people are getting the right information. So thank you, because I think there's some brilliant tips in there. And I think, look, if I could wrap up some of those thoughts, I think what Susan's really trying to get across here is, we live in a world of so much information, and most people are doing that with the best intention, but it can be misleading, it can be very confusing, and it can have us going in all kinds of directions. Yes, of course, I'm going to say reach out to Susan or a fellow accountant, but equally, what Susan's also saying is validate your information, because the days of My Mate Down the Pub type thing have got out of hand, in that my mate on social media, or I saw this thing. It needs to be validated before you go running down the wrong rabbit hole. Thank you. I think that's really, really important. And it's just a reminder of just the noise of the world that we're living in. It's an absolute minefield. And that's where, like Susan's not saying this, kind of pitching her service, I would say to anybody, when you're thinking about resources and support, it's got to be up there at the top of the list. If you are a business owner, so there's a personal piece as well, but we're not even going to go down that route. But as business owners, as founders, I say all the time, you do not have a business if you are not making money. Okay. Now, I'm not saying you should be making money from day one, but your goal is to make money. That is what a business is. And because that is so important, and the best way to do that is, yes, I'll say, have the right people around you to support you to learn how to make money, but also have the right support around you to learn how to report that money, look after that money, and do what you're supposed to do with that money correctly. And that's where the likes of Susan.
And that's where I was talking to someone the other day, and it's just, you've got to think of it as a wheel. You're the cog in the middle, and you've got all these spokes of different people, coaches, accountants, financial advisors, people that do the websites, people that do your copyright, the people that can help you in so many different parts of your business. It's just a big wheel of a community that's helping your business thrive.
It really is. And I know that can feel like, again, that's the bit where that can feel overwhelming. We're not all saying you've got to go and spend all this money on everybody. Back to the point that you made right earlier on when you talked about stepping into running the business yourself. You had already got out there and built that network. You had those people around you, and you've then tapped in as you've needed to. Susan, if you could go back to 16-year-old Susan and offer her any advice for what was coming that you now know has, transpired, what would you say to her?
Be a travel agent.
That's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I feel like I want to just go that mic drop moment. Susan does love to travel as well. So she probably would actually say, Susan, be a travel agent. It will work out much better for us. We get to do all the things we want to do. Absolutely love that. I don't need any, please don't go back and change that now. Don't go no more seriously. Love that. But let me ask my final question, which I always ask as well. And that is, for our listeners, what one piece of advice, and I guess not just as an accountant, as a business owner, as a female founder, as someone who actively works on herself, works on her mindset, seeks out the support and the network around her, what would be your absolute number one piece of advice to a fellow female founder?
You don't need to know it all. So there's nothing wrong with saying, I don't know how to make a website. I don't know how to do a spreadsheet. I don't know how to set up MailerLite. I don't know how to do these things. It's find, and again, that comes back to the network, is find the people that do know how to do it, can do it quickly, and you've got that peace of mind that it's done to the standard that you want to do it to. There's no harm in going out and trying to work it out for yourself and learning that. And that sometimes is all the budget can allow, but you don't need to know it all.
No, I think that's a brilliant piece of advice. And I'm going to say it again, you do not need to know it all. You don't need to have it all either. I mean, like that random route, but to your point, if the budget doesn't allow, go out and build the relationships, because there are always people that want to support. That doesn't mean people are going to give you loads of free work. I want to be really clear about that. That's not why I'm advocating at all. But there are always, I know from my own experience, I know you do, we've always found people that are like, well, look, I can give you a couple of minutes. Let me give you a couple of tips, or here's the best way to go and learn. Or even someone saying, do you know what? You don't need that right now. Because sometimes we think we need to know and have so much more in place than we do. And someone else might go, do you know what? None of that's actually going to make a difference right now. When you ask the question is when people tell you those things. So I think that's a brilliant piece of advice and a brilliant point to wrap up. Susan, thank you so much for all of your wisdom, everything you've shared today, for being honest, for being vulnerable, for keeping it real, but also there's some really great tips in there. We will put all of your links in the show notes. Just while people are listening, where is the best place to come and connect with you if people want to come and find out more or reach out to you directly?
So Instagram, I'm trying to sort of be a bit more out there on that.
No, good old social.
Yeah, and LinkedIn.
So we've got LinkedIn, Instagram, and email. We'll put all those links in the show notes. Reach out to Susan if you've got any questions on anything we've talked about today. Share this on the socials if you think, oh my God, someone else needs to listen to this, because there's some great tips in there, because there are. Susan, thank you so much. Listeners, thank you for being here with us. And remember, as always, she is courageous and she is you.